part, for instance, you know that you've got a 2x2 corner guard going on the outside, right? So you've got 2 inches by 2 inches. Like, to me, you should be able to cut it so that it's an inch or a quarter shorter. And you should never ever have to trim, right? Same with the top. Like, I get that sometimes, you know, you're handling your piece, it gets stuck, you didn't get it quite the right spot, it rides up. Okay, you got to trim it. It happens, right? We all know that. It shouldn't be what we're trying to do, right? It shouldn't be we're going to be a 1/4 inch high and we're going to trim everything. Because how do you get a laminate trimmer into an inside corner? It gets in so far, and then you're left with the laminate sticking up in that inside corner. It's an absolute nightmare to try and clean up, right? For me, it's, you know what the width of your trim is, and like it's fairly straightforward to leave everything an 1/8 of an inch back, right? It's not rocket science. It's just you gotta have a plan. Who knows what the different bits are for? Do we have diamond bits in here anymore? I don't think we do we?
No.
This is a while. What are we using this one for?
Leave it?
Yeah, no bearing on it. It's in not bad shape. So these are only for finished edges. Right? These all have a bevel on them. Right? And the point of the Teflon bearing is that if you've got a finished face here and you've got your laminate overhanging and it's a finished face here, this will not burn your finished face on the other side. Right? And this has got a bevel on it, so it's cutting a slight angle. So if you set it properly, there should be virtually no sand profiling when all is said and done. Which is another finished bit, which is also a bevel bit. I don't know why we've got more than one in here, but you can all see how the corners are rounded over on this. That's an indication that the bearing is getting munged up. The bearing gets contact cement in it, it starts to get sticky, and then as you're trying to land your router, it does this, it turns around and it smacks the triangle and then it wears those corners off. So, you know, I can look at that and know right away that nobody's bothered lubricating this bearing. But probably they've not bothered lubricating the bearing because they don't have any bearing lubricant in the back of the pins. Because we put bearing lubricant in and nobody knew what the fuck to do with it. And so then why even bother putting it in there, right? It's Teflon inside too. Yep.
WD cleans off lacquer cleaner for glue.
Yep.
Pretty much cleans it up.
You need a dry silicone lubricant.
Yeah.
That's what you need. Or, you know, just keep everything clean to begin with. Don't have a shit ton of overspray everywhere. And that way your bearings don't get bunged up and everything works a lot better. What are we doing about overspray? How is the overspray situation recently?
It's a lot better.
Do we need to talk about gun maintenance? This one's missing the handle. This one's so right here is really the only adjustment that we have, right? And what's inside of here is just a shaft, and then it's 2 Teflon donuts. Teflon just like a hard plastic that's kind of slippery. So when you tighten this down, it basically squishes these 2 donuts so that they get a little bit smaller diameter hole, and it will stop things from leaking around this shaft. But if you do it too tight, now the handle sticks, right? You pull it and it won't release. So that's basically how you know. You have to tighten it enough that it doesn't leak, but not so much that it causes the gun to not function properly. The issue is over time, particularly if this shaft gets all bunged up with a bunch of excess spray, either it's going to stick, or as you use it, the Teflon wears out a little bit, right? So when it wears out a little bit, it starts leaking. And everybody's like, oh, this gun's fucked, blah, blah, blah. Literally all you got to do is probably like an 1/8 of a turn on this little thing here, and it will stop leaking. Now, eventually you get to the point where it's completely sealed or completely worn out, and then we've got rebuild kits, and you rebuild it. New springs, new bushing, or new Teflon guides, and new washers, and all of that jazz. But, you know, when I look at the end of this gun and I see all the buildup on it, like, it isn't going to spray properly like this, right? So, this end piece, if you lock the gun out with this comes up, so now you lock it, you can't pull the trigger anymore, right? This is how we should be traveling too. Like when we're transporting the guns, we should always lock them up. Because what happens, I think, where we have problems here half the time is something presses on this in a bucket or wherever it is, and then it's just leaking.
Especially that one, because it doesn't have the finger guard.
Exactly. But now that this is locked out, you can undo this, you can pull all the gubbins off the end, and you can just put it in a little jar of lacquer thinner and just let it soak. Clean it up with a rag, and you're good to go. All of this works. These two bits can just get soaked. But if you guys have a look at it, you can see that there's contact cement dry on the inside there. That is not going to help your gun spray. Well, the other thing that'll happen is you can get, if any air gets in here and dries inside here, it can actually dry in the little valve. And all it is a needle that pulls back. So if you take it apart, this one's in bad shape. Yeah. That will most often blast whatever shit's inside of it out of there, but then you gotta get a rag with some lacquer thinner and wipe the thing down. Right? So we can't leave it like this. We're gonna have to wipe it off. This one's filthy. So the long and the short of it is these things need to be maintained, and they need to be maintained regularly. We're gonna let this soak. We'll carry on chit-chatting, and then we'll clean it up, put it back together, and see if we can get her to spray. How often do we think we need to be doing this? Yeah, for sure. If you're spraying, like if you're doing wall protection, you should be cleaning this thing basically every day. And it should be pretty much spotless. There should not be excess glue anywhere. You can here, because it will eventually inside wear and the seal will stop sealing properly, but then you just tighten this down. The other problem you have is when there's so much shit on the guns, you can't tell if they're leaking or not. Right? Because the glue itself will hide the fact that more glue is coming out unless it gets really bad. Right? Like this gun is in bad shape, I can tell you. It needs some loving, but you know, the end of it needs to be clean like that. Like there shouldn't be any excess on it. And if it's clean like that, it should, right? So that's a nice straight stream now. When I sprayed it the first time, it's like your dick after you've been having sex all night. It goes, flies everywhere. You don't know where it's going to go, right? So you got to clean them. That's all there is to it.
Okay, so we got to clean all that.
This thing wouldn't come apart.
When you get it on a wall, you can't clean it. Yeah, those.
You can actually get different sizes of these, different size holes, and different angles, right? So how Horst was complaining that fire-rated adhesive doesn't spray the same, it probably doesn't, and maybe we need to get a different. From personal experience, there's nothing more infuriating than a spray gun that's not working properly. It just makes your entire night suck, especially if you're trying to do, you know, sheets and sheets and sheets and sheets of wall protection. It also means you can't accurately spray an even coat, which then becomes a problem for our adhesion, right? If you don't have an even coat, then it's just not going to stick properly. So, you know, for the guys in the field, you need to be maintaining these on the regular, right? You can't just expect that tools are going to work and work and work and that they're never going to need to be maintained. So, same with the Fez tool, same with every tool that we use, right? Rudder bits are basically a consumable, but a rudder bit will last a lot longer if you take good care of it and if you're not forcing it, right? You gotta let the bit cut. Those bevel bits are not meant to ever be fully captured in laminate. They're only meant to trim off, preferably no more than 1/8 of an inch, right? So for the longest time, I had a diamond blade flush cut with a big bearing on it so that it would leave a 1/16 inch of material, and I would just buzz through with that, leave a 1/16, and then I would have the finished bit set properly, and I would just trim my 1/16 off with the bevel bit set to just the right height. And then all I had to do is give it a little wipe down with lacquer thinner to get the extra spray off, or the extra glue off the edge, and a quick touch with the file, and you're done. That's how I used to do all my countertops. I used to do all this shit by hand. We used to make Canadian tires with plastic laminate doors, and we would edge band all the doors by hand. Like hours of nothing but spraying and sticking and trimming and filing and sanding. For like, we would do, let's call it 50 doors. It might take us a week, right? Because you gotta do all 4 edges, and then you gotta do the front and the back face, and everything's gotta be trimmed and filed. So I have lots of practice of doing this stuff. You're already working at night, you're already out of town, you're already away from your family. Why wouldn't you take care of your tools so you don't gotta fight with them too? Have you ever heard the story of the two lumberjacks? Any of you guys know this one? There's two lumberjacks and they would be cutting trees, and the one lumberjack would leave for an hour every afternoon, and the second lumberjack would like always wonder where the hell he went. But the first lumberjack always cut just as many trees as the second lumberjack. And so he asked him one day, he's like, where do you go every day? And how come you can cut as many trees as I do, even though you take an hour off? And he says, oh, I go home and I sharpen my axe. Sharpen your axe, right? Like, you want to just keep bashing the trees with the dull axe, or do you want to go home and sharpen it, and then you can chop a lot easier in the afternoon? That's kind of what we're talking about. These things should stay open at all times. If you have to replace a hose, like if your can is empty, you cannot disconnect this hose. The hose has to stay attached at all times. The second you disconnect this hose, air gets inside of it, the glue dries, the hose is garbage. Right? So the hoses are what, $250 these days?
Yep.
Yeah. So we would prefer it if you weren't wrecking hoses on the regular. But if you do need to swap the gun, you just leave it attached to the empty tank until you get a new tank, and then once you get a new tank, you turn this off, you put the gun in a garbage can or spray it at some place where it's, you know, cardboard or whatever, get all the glue out of it as quick as you can, pop this, put it on the new tank, turn the new tank on, spray, and then now you've got full glue back in your hose and your hose will be fine. Does everybody understand that one? So somebody stole the glue gun out of the shop that was working?
That happens.
Is that what you're saying, Ryan? So, you know, when you guys are in the field and you're under time pressure, which you often are, like when we tell you to get to work a half an hour early, like part of it's to make a plan, part of it's to, you know, look at what you're doing, but if you're gonna be spraying contact all night, take 10 minutes and clean your gun. Like, get your tools prepared. You can't work because you're there before the store closes, but you can definitely clean your gun. You can definitely get organized with your tools, make sure everything is, you know, working the way it's supposed to be working. You know, obviously if you've got a dull blade and you find out a half an hour before your shift starts, that's a problem. Can't fix that unless you have a spare one with you. But if you're well prepared and you have a spare, then change your blade, right? The nasty shit that comes off of here, where do you think it goes? Straight up. So like if I go like this, I can smell it right away. If I stand here, like literally a half a foot back, I don't smell it at all. So when you're spraying, particularly when you're spraying your sheet of laminate, I know a lot of you guys like to lay it on the ground and do this, possibly the worst thing you can do, because all of those fumes are evaporating and coming straight up into your face, right? So I liked to lay the laminate against the wall, right? And then I would spray it standing up, and then I'd move it out of the way, and I'd use my backer to spray the backer, and then I would lay the laminate. So as much as possible, avoid doing this. This is like worst case scenario as far as inhaling the fumes that come from this stuff, right? This gun, still, I wouldn't spray with this thing if it was me.
Because the pin and everything's got glue in it.
Yeah, it's the whole thing is munged up with glue, and it all has to come apart. It all has to get wiped down, and yeah, so it's moving as well, though, because they're supposed to be separate, right? We can clean some guns up. We can go through sort of how to set the fan and what the adjustments are and all of that jazz with you guys. It's probably best to do that in the field. It's a good idea to stop on the ends too, right? Let go as you come off the backside and then squeeze again as you go on. Otherwise you just end up spraying, overspray everywhere. And as the angle changes, the distance changes, right? If you're 6 inches away, right? As soon as you do this, now you're 8 inches away. And so now the amount of material that you're laying down changes, right? And the worst part is where you normally do that is on the end, which is actually where you need the most coverage for the glue, because that's where your seam is going to be. If you're in the middle of a 4x8 and you come away or go a little bit closer, it isn't really going to make much of a difference. But on those two ends in particular, like, you need to be sure you've got proper coverage there. So when I used to do it, I would do a vertical, spray that first, one fan width, about 6 inches, up and down, so I've got one coat on there already. I'd do it on both ends, and then I would do my cross spray like this with the overlap. And I knew for sure that both the outside ends were covered, right? And if you don't put on too heavy of a coat, it will off-gas quick enough that by the time you're coming across your second coat, it's not gonna be so much that you end up with runs and all that kind of jazz, right? Basically, you only get runs when your gun's not been properly maintained, and you get your spray, instead of having a nice fan, you end up with this, or you end up with one particular spot where it's all together and you just like have a bunch of liquid hitting it instead of it being fanned out and you get the spider web, right? So there's a couple of different styles, but they're all hand out like that. There's no sort of extensions or anything like that that we're needed for them. Not that I'm aware of anything. So the other issue we run into is like I might be able to go to the gun manufacturer's website and they might have an accessory, but then how do I buy it? Like if I go to Richelieu and Richelieu only stocks the guns and they have to special order the part, you know, it's you don't know if it's going to actually fit, because a lot of times Richelieu, like there's a few different places you can get these from, right? So Richelieu will buy from whoever is the cheapest, right? Or whoever they can get the most markup from. So even though I bought the gun from them and I'm looking at a gun online on that website that maybe has an accessory available, no guarantee that it'll fit with our guns. So, I mean, for the longest time, I had swivels here so that the hose wouldn't get all bound up on you. I think the swivel got lost after about the first 3 weeks. It was a $140 part. I'm like, okay, fine. That's how my tools are going to get taken care of. Fuck it. You guys can deal with twisted cords. You know, not you guys. Obviously, you weren't here, but this is sort of, for me as a business owner, if I'm going to provide something to make your life easier and then it disappears after 3 weeks and nobody knows what happened to it, and you know, it's all a big mystery. It's like, okay, fine, we're not doing that anymore, right? So, yeah. So another thing you guys can do is you can do a single sheet of backer on the rolling cart, like on the drywall cart, and then put your laminate on the drywall cart with the backside out. And then if you wrap the drywall cart ahead of time with the plastic, you can just spray on the drywall cart, right? Take your sheets off, cut whatever holes you need to cut for them if that's what you're going to do, and then just spray them on the drywall cart. Just make sure you hold something in behind as you're going around doing all the perimeter so that you don't have overspray going everywhere. That's an option as well. Again, it all comes to planning and being prepared. Like a drywall cart is probably a good idea if you've got a Walmart where you're putting up 50 sheets in a long run across the entire front of the store and you constantly have to be moving, right? If you're in a vestibule where you're, you know, a 5 or 6 steps to every single corner, but it's maybe 30 or 40 sheets, well, the drywall cart's just going to get in your way, right? So it just depends on what you're doing. You got to think about what's my job activity, what's the most efficient workflow, right? And it's not always the same answer, right? But we do know not having a shit ton of overspray everywhere means that cleanup is way quicker, right? And then if your gun has been properly maintained and spraying correctly, that makes life a lot easier. We need to talk about fans for sure, right? Airflow, particularly if you're working in a vestibule. Like for me, if you're in a vestibule, the best case scenario is it's not winter time, it's summer. You can prop the doors open ever so slightly, right, from the inside of the store, and then have a fan blowing out to the outside, so the air is being drawn from the inside to the outside. Well, I think Milwaukee has some 18-inch fans out now.
Yes.
Big ones like this, right? They'll move quite a bit of air. Because, like, we looked at the MSDS yesterday, right? The instruction is adequate airflow. So basically for me, adequate airflow means that there's enough airflow there that you guys are not suffering any ill effects of spraying the glue, right? You should be able to spray all night long and feel just as good at the end of the night as you do at the beginning of the night, right? If you're getting a headache, or you're feeling tired, or you're feeling a little upset, or you're dragging, or like upset stomach, or you're dragging, you know, like you just feel low energy, you know, assuming it's not because you only slept 2 hours the night before and it's because you've been spraying glue, like that's not good, right? So, you know, again, there's a lot of things you can do, like in a big store, even if you're in a full superstore, like on the main sales floor, if you stand over top while you're spraying, you're gonna feel like shit by the end of your shift, right? There's no amount of airflow that's gonna stop that from happening, right? It just comes up, right? So how you spray, where you stand when you're spraying, that all matters as well. But clearly, if we're in a confined space like a vestibule or something like that, we got to get something to provide airflow. So we'll look at getting some fans. We'll get one. We'll get you guys to try it out. Let us know what you think, and then we'll go from there. Decide if it's something that we're going to add for everyone.
And if we do, where do we pack it or store?
Well, there's the $1 million question, because our vans are only so big, and I can't buy any bigger ones. So let's talk about suspending trellises and how we suspend trellises. So who knows the do's and don'ts of connecting to structure? Of connecting to structure. Like, can you attach a wire to the bottom of that joist there?
What?
A wire, a suspension point to the bottom of the joist.
I love that one.
Not from any of them. Generally speaking, attaching to the bottom of the joist is a no-no. It's definitely a gray area. So I was talking with TC structural engineer because we're getting given a hard time at Chestermere by some guy who thinks he knows what he's talking about but doesn't have a fucking clue. Yeah. So, but he's not wrong. Attaching to the bottom of the joist, generally speaking, is not permitted. A lot of drawings, new drawings in particular for new builds, will specifically state you cannot attach to the bottom of the joist. You have to attach to the top of the joist. However, for the loads that we're doing when we're suspending trellises, like the lighter Safeway trellises, not for all trellises, but for these ones in particular, there's that web that goes like this. So if you attach at the bottom of the web and you actually loop around the web, then the load's being carried from the top down to that mounting point. It's when you get in between the webs, that metal is not meant for suspending any kind of a load, right? It's meant to be under tension, right? So when you push down, it basically is trying to turn it into a smiley face. So it's pulling on that metal. That's what it's designed for. It doesn't mean it won't support it. It just means it's not designed for that. And when a structural engineer comes through and sees it, then we're gonna have a problem, right? So same thing with the weight, the load that the mounting points have to take. Even though those things only weigh 400 pounds and there's 23 mounting points, each mounting point has to be adequate to support 70 pounds. And it's not because they all add up to whatever 23 times 100 is, because that's what our mounting points are, 2,300 pounds, right? Well, we're only supporting 400 pounds. Why do we need all these mounting points? It's because the aluminum structure that those slats attach to, it can't support itself. It'll start to deform, right? It'll start to bend. So they think they said 8 foot on centers max, 3 feet from the end, and then each one of those points has to be able to support 70 pounds because the whole thing is trying to bend as it goes. So what we're actually doing is supporting the aluminum from deflecting, not supporting the total load. And I've run into this before where it's like, even though in a static straight pull load, yes, we can hang 2,300 pounds from that thing safely, but we can't hang the 400 pounds that we're trying to hang and have it hang properly unless each one of those points is sufficient to support 70 pounds. So I'm not an engineer. I deal with engineers on a fairly regular basis. I like to think I sort of have an idea of how this all works. That was a new one on me. Like, I would not have guessed that. I would have thought 8-10 mounting points should have been more than sufficient to hang those things for the load that we have. But that is, in fact, not the case. So I learned something in that conversation, right? So best practices again. Saddles, beam clamp, or Q-deck clips, and the studs. That is the way we need to be doing this, if at all possible, right? And the reason for the saddles is you can see the Q-deck, how it's got the little part that drops down and then the little part that's flat above. If you screw into the flat above, you're probably going to punch a hole through the membrane of the roof, and we're going to have a leak, and it's going to be a big insurance claim and an absolute nightmare. That's why I use the saddles, because the saddles go on, you can only screw from the side, and you can only attach them to the lower section, and it's pretty much impossible unless you use a fucking 6-inch screw or something, you know, but using the screws that we supply, there's no way you're ever going to punch through the membrane, right? Now, that being said, in Leduc, we had a situation where we had no alternative. We had to use the threaded eyes, right? So the threaded eyes in Leduc, we were given special permission to do that. This is not my preference. It doesn't mean it's unsafe, but you know, all it takes is staring up in the middle of the night in the dark and being 4 inches the wrong way to punch a hole in the membrane, and then we've got a real problem, like a real problem. So I don't want you guys using those threaded eyes unless there is literally absolutely no other alternative. How long do we fight with those guys before we finally decided that we were going to do that? A long time. Like, moving forward, we're trying to get them to remove the T-bar for us, give us access. That for me is the best way to do it. I know that it's a pain in the ass to get up there, but I think once you get up there, like, the deck clips are pretty straightforward. Right? The other thing with the deck clips is I know that the deck clip is rated for 236 pounds. The assembly that we're using is rated for 100 pounds, but I have less confidence in those eye screws. If you over torque that eye screw and you strip that thread out a little bit, it isn't going to maintain its holding power. Right? So then it becomes a lot more dependent on the skill of the installer and making sure that they don't over torque it when they thread it in. And if they do, then there is a lot of uncertainty in what the actual failure point on the load rating is going to be. Well, Leduc was a particularly bad case.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you guys are having similar problems in Chestermere, are you?
No, it's only wide open, that's for you.
Yeah.
Real place.
Yeah. More or less, if I tell you this is the way I want it done, then that's the way I expect it to be done. And if for some reason you can't do it that way, it's not, oh, we're going to do it this other way because we did it before on this other job. That's not how this works. It's, here's an email in the morning, here's some site photos, I can't get up here, can I please have permission to use the threaded eyes? I think we need to do that in this circumstance. And then we'll look at it, we'll talk about it, we'll discuss it with our client, we'll get permission, then we'll move forward, right? It's not just, oh, there's no other way to do it. Well, there's no other way you know how to do it, but that doesn't mean there's not another way I know how to do it, or Jim knows how to do it, or Cam knows how to do it, right? So we have to get away from making choices in the field without asking for permission first, right? Or notifying us that you're having a problem. So, because we run into problems in the regular, right? So whenever you're doing something that's not our standard, that should send up a red flag. Hey, I need to let somebody know that we've got a problem here and we're not going to be able to use the deck clips. Or I don't think we can use the deck clips. Maybe the solution is we get you a different piece of equipment, right? Maybe the solution is we go to the GC and tell them they got to move some stuff for us. Like, there are options that you're maybe not considering at 2 a.m. So, but again, it goes back to what our best practices are. So if we're following our best practices, then everything's fine. If for some reason we can't, then we need to have a conversation. We can't just proceed because we did it on another job at another time and it was okay, right? Because that job could have been for a different client that didn't care. Like in this particular circumstance, I find faintly hilarious because Gene is on a phone call with me, the project manager of Sobeys, right? So we did mill-rise Sobeys for Gene. He never asked a single question. Those things weighed, like, I don't even know what they weighed, like 1,000 pounds, 800 pounds? Way more. Yeah, exactly. So we suspended all of that shit, hung all of that. Gene never said a fucking word. Now we're hanging these piddly little 400-pound aluminum foam things, and it's like the whole world has come to an end, and we don't think they've got the expertise, and they don't have the right suspension hardware, and blah, 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 a whole bunch of fucking bullshit, right? So, you know, That's just how life goes sometimes. Like I said, everything's fine until it's not. So yeah, as I said, our best practice is to use the deck clips, and that's what we need to be doing if at all possible. And if it's not possible, you need to let somebody know, right? Just like we've discussed all of the things that we want to do when it comes to, you know, the fascia and the wall protection, our standard procedures. And if you're for some reason unable to follow our standard procedure, for whatever that reason is, you need to let somebody know. You need to let us know what's going on. Say, hey, here, we're having a problem. This is what we think we need to do. Are you guys okay with this? Because if you don't, and you just proceed and it doesn't fly, it's coming back on me, which then means it's coming back on you, right? So all of this communication is about you guys letting me know so I can let the client know so that we can proceed. And then when they complain about it, we just say, well, listen, guys, we told you this is what we were going to do here. We gave you all the reasons why, and your project manager approved us to do it this way. Because I've had this happen many a time, where we'll get approval from the PM, and then the architect will be doing their walkthrough at the end of the job, and we'll be like, no, we don't like that. And I'll just say, well, listen, here's the approval from your PM. So you take it up with him, because I got permission from your guy. Oh, and by the way, the PM is the guy that pays us. Right? So if the guy that pays us says it's okay, it's okay. And then if that guy made a mistake and the architect says no, that isn't going to fly, you have to get your mill workers to change that, then he's going to have to pay me to change it because he told me to do it the other way in the first place. Right? So it's about giving them the opportunity to say yes or no, and then we just follow their instructions. I don't decide any of this on my own. Very rarely do I make an executive decision and tell you guys to proceed, right? I think I did it for you on the fascia because it was going to be 1 inch and I knew we could get away with it, right? So I'm like, just lower it 1 inch, don't worry about it, move on, nobody's ever going to notice, right? That doesn't happen very often, right? Like most of the time, I got to ask and I'll get back to you and let you know. So as much as possible every night, I would like you guys to put everything away. Like put it back where it came from. Right? I know when you've got some hardware and whatnot, that's sometimes difficult to manage. Moving forward, like if we do another vision center, we'll have a pack out with all the specific hardware for the vision center or whatever, right? Like we'll try and start creating little tool, or not tool kits, but hardware kits for the specific jobs, right? I think we'll look at getting some drywall screws to test and see how that goes. Or you're going to, we need to find you some laminate too. But you're only got little strips to do, right? Yeah, so that won't be a good test. Maybe at the Walmart, you guys are going to have to put a fair bit of wallboard up, are you not? There's still some laminating to do there down that whole hallway that's created by the Vision Center. Yeah, so maybe we can get some drywall screws for you guys and you can try them out and see how it goes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. How comfortable are you guys reading drawings? Like, do you guys know how to read a drawing and how to navigate a drawing and how to find the information on the drawings? Pardon me? Yeah.
I'm getting better.
Do you guys know what Keynote is? Do you know how to follow a section note? You guys good with that too? Yeah.
Need more
Okay.
practice, so
Okay.
I'm going to say yes if you
Okay. So in the renovations in particular, do you guys know how to figure out what's being demolished and what's not being demolished, or what's changing and what's not changing? You guys know that there's a demo plan, right? So for the refrigeration in particular, especially on a renovation, it's good to have a look at the demo plan because a lot of the refrigeration, a lot of the time is remaining, right? Like often the entire perimeter of the store, like I think at 1570, they basically didn't change anything on the outside of the store, did they? The one in Edmonton that you did?
Superstore.
Last one? The perimeter of the store was pretty much stayed the same. It was only the islands in the center that they changed, right? Yeah, and so a lot of times that's what the case is. And then it's the islands. Normally it's the islands that they're changing. Yeah, yeah. So when you go to a job site, it's a good idea to have reviewed the demo drawing because then you've got an idea of areas that are going to be destroyed and something new built, right? Like the customer service area at the Walmart or at Chestermere, right? Chestermere right now, where their customer service desk is, that's all getting ripped out. They're gonna build a wall and they're gonna put an office in there, right?
Just cash it.
Yeah, so when you look at the wall finish plan and you see the laminate's supposed to go across there, and then you're looking at the space and you're going, well, wait a minute, there's a customer service desk. How are we gonna laminate there? That's when you gotta go look at probably the floor plan and the demo plan, right? If you look at the floor plan and you see that there's a wall there, then you can figure out pretty quickly, oh, they gotta build a wall here, right? You look at the demo plan and you'll see that that whole area is getting demolished. And you're like, yeah, they're definitely building a wall here. So you know the number one, like the first drawing has an index almost 100% of the time. So if you open up the very first drawing, it gives you a list of what all the drawings are. So it says 0.0 title page, 0.1 site plan, 0.2 it's usually like parking lot plan or some shit like that, and then it gets down into whatever it is, and you'll have a construction plan, or sometimes they call it a floor plan. You'll have interior elevations, exterior elevations, you'll have wall sections, you'll have millwork details, and it'll list what all those drawings are. So if you're looking for the demolition plan, you open up the first drawing, you read through the index and go, oh, 0.4 is the demolition plan. Then this guy right here has broken all the drawings down and has named the file with the drawing number. So you go, oh, A0.4, click, and you open that, and there's your demo plan. You do your original walk around of the job site, take note of the refrigeration. And then when you ask the GC, hey, is this area ready for me? And he says, oh yeah, that's all ready to go. And you're like, well guys, it's the same refrigeration that was here the first day I walked on site. Is that new? No. Oh, well your demo drawing here says that it's supposed to be new refrigeration. Like, did the plans change? And then they look, oh yeah, right. They don't give a fuck. They're not looking at the drawings closely. They're just giving you whatever answer will make you go away and leave them alone most of the time, right? So Shane would probably be the exception to that rule. And it's not like all of them are going to do this all the time, but basically what I'm getting at is don't trust those guys to tell you what to do. You've got all the information. You should know what you're supposed to be doing, and then tell them, hey guy, I would like to work in this area. It doesn't look like this area is complete. Can you please confirm when it's going to be complete? As opposed to, hey, where can I work next? Right? That's kiss of death. Yeah. If you start saying where can I work next, like, oh my god, it's gonna get ugly in a hurry. Yeah. So, and you kind of learn all of this as you go through a few. Yeah, for sure. Right. But this is why we really caution you guys against, and then never ever take instructions from the site guy on where to put finishes. Like, if it's not in the drawings and it hasn't come out in an email from somebody, you can't proceed. Right? If it's in the drawings, okay, fine. Then he can say, yes, that wall right there is ready to go. And then you can look at that wall and go, well, they haven't even mudded it yet, and it's not time. It's not ready for us. We can't install our laminate. When is that other work going to be done? Right? So, yeah. But again, this is what I was talking about. So like the fascia plan legend, if you make this available offline, you made it a favorite, which is fine. So if you make it available offline, you get that green check mark. Now, even if you're in the deepest bowels of the building with no cell phone coverage and no Wi-Fi, it'll still open, no problem, right? And then it's got the green check mark, so you know it's one of the drawings that you need on the regular, right? And then the other thing is you guys need to be looking at this drawing regular, or this file regularly. Yeah. Because this tells you all the work that needs to be done, right? That was originally in my price, but then oftentimes, like, there wasn't any changes on this, but I'll put in here, I'll put a section which is changes to scope of work, and it'll say PCN 12, add wall protection, PCN 14, add office counters. This is where you're gonna find out what's going on in the job. Right? If you don't ever look at this, you're going to be flying blind.
Like they plan on a facelift on the staff room, then they change their mind.
Yeah.